And thousands of mourners have gathered in Bahrain for the funerals of anti-government protesters killed in a brutal crackdown. The riot police and the Gulf state reportedly used supplies made by British companies to clear the protest. Human rights watchdogs are calling for an embargo on arms supplies and a disclosure of why export licenses were issued. Well, for more, I'm joined by Barnaby Pace. He's from the Campaign Against the Arms Trade. He's in London. Thanks indeed for joining us. Now, up until now, Bahrain has been a stable and a good partner for Britain because of its strategic importance in the Gulf. So shouldn't the UK supply them with riot control equipment?
Well, I think there's something of a catch-22. If you're selling someone weapons and they want to buy weapons, it's generally speaking because they intend to use those weapons at some point. And so stepping back and saying, oh, well, we sold them the tear gas and we're terribly shocked that they used that tear gas on protesters is somewhat disingenuous.
But even Britain has protesters in the streets and you get violent protests. Surely authorities need some way of controlling crowds?
Well, possibly so, but you can see that this was always is going to be possible. We may say that Bahrain was a healthy ally, but we can see across the Middle East that the UK government is selling to repressive regimes all over that this could happen at any point in. And we've got to be aware that when we're selling both non-lethal and lethal equipment, those will be used and generally, at some point, they'll be used on someone innocent.
But bearing in mind that obviously the arms trade is a very big industry, not just in Britain, but many countries throughout the world, how can possibly a country that sells arms to another country have influence in the way they're used?
Well, this is the problem, is that once you've handed over the weapons, you have little control over how they're used, but that doesn't mean you can morally justify handing them over in the first place. If you're selling someone weapons, the weapons are going to be used. Your chain of moral responsibility doesn't stop once you've handed over the weapons. And frankly, the UK government needs to seriously reconsider how it approaches arms sales in the first place. Not only have these arms been licensed to be sold overseas in the case of Bahrain, but they are actively promoted as such. The UK government actively promotes arms sales to a number of repressive regimes. This very weekend, the UK government is sending representatives out to the large arms fair in Abu Dhabi. It's called IDEX, which the arms industry trade body in the UK claims 10% of its exhibitors will be British at this fair, and the UK actively encourages these companies to sell, including the very equipment that is being used in protesters in the Middle East as we speak.
But are you saying that Britain directly and purposefully would perhaps supply arms to dictatorships or indeed even rogue states like Somalia? I mean, it's fairly choosy on who it does business with, surely.
Well, the UK does tend to draw the line at Somalia, but it's not choosy about where it does its business. A very clear example is Saudi Arabia, where for years the UK has made Saudi Arabia its #1 target customer, where we can see a very clear authoritarian and whereas it's a monarchy rather than a dictatorship, but it's very clear a repressive state that has used those weapons in human rights abuses. Last year, Amnesty International pointed out that fighter jets sold to Saudi Arabia in the massive Al Yamamah arms program in the 80s, sold from the UK and BAE systems to Saudi Arabia, were probably used against innocent civilians in the cross-border conflict between Saudi Arabia and Yemen, and have probably been used in human rights abuses there. This is not new. I mean, they should know that these weapons are going to be misused if they choose to sell them.
You make a very persuasive argument, and indeed the British government has responded today. They say there's no evidence that UK manufactured tear gas was used in this crackdown, but nevertheless the MOD is now going to review arms exports to Britain. Indeed, France has cancelled any arms exports to Bahrain, so any arms exports from Britain are now being reviewed. What do you make of the response of the British government now?
Well, it's certainly late. I mean, I'd rather they placed the embargo on them now and stopped any further shipments going out. But the fact is, the horse has already bolted now that they're seeing to the stable door. The weapons are there and they don't go around. They don't go away. The weapons hang around for centuries. They don't go off in 6 weeks' time. They're going to stay there. And the fact is, the UK needs to seriously look at not just whether selling to a specific country is an is a good idea, but but how it should be selling arms and if it should be selling arms at all. The fact is these weapons are widely misused, and the UK's arms export criteria, which look good on paper, are very rarely applied with any rigour.
Interesting talking to you, Barnaby. We'll leave it there. Barnaby Pace from the Campaign Against the Arms Trade joining us live in London. Thanks very much indeed for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.